My dear students, hope everything is fine. Today we will focus on English literature. So let's begin. Children, please use earphones for better audibility. Children, have you ever met a stranger with a peculiar look and a terrible voice? I think you have never met such a stranger in your life. But if you ever meet such a stranger when you are alone, how you will feel? You will be very scared. Today we will read one such story entitled Pip Meets a Convict, written by Charles Dickens, where an orphan boy named Pip meets a convict. Do you know who is a convict? A convict is a prisoner who is guilty of a criminal offense. Pip meets a convict in the graveyard. Now let me tell you what is a graveyard. A graveyard is a place, often next to a church, where dead people are buried. Now let us see how frightened Pip was. Now, before starting the story, let me tell you about the author, Charles Dickens. Children, see the image of Charles Dickens. Charles Dickens was one of the foremost Victorian English novelists who was born in 1812 in the Landport, Portsea, England. He was the second of 8 children. His father was a poor navy clerk who moved to London with his family when Charles was 10 years old. At the age of 12, Charles left school and went to work in a factory to support the family. In his spare time, Charles read constantly. He moved around the poor working-class districts and slum areas inhabited by criminals. He describes these places and their inhabitants in his novels. In 1832, he joined as a reporter for a London newspaper, the experience of which helped to strengthen his writing ability. Charles Dickens wrote over 20 novels. His first novel, Pickwick Papers, was published in 1836. His next novel, Oliver Twist, appeared in 1838. His other leading works are David Copperfield, A Christmas Carol, A Tale of Two Cities, and Great Expectations. Dickens was best known for creating wonderful characters. He wanted to make the world a better place to live in. He advocated for children's rights, education, and for the transformation of society where everyone should have equal rights. He died in 1870. This story, Pip Meets a Convict, is taken from the novel Great Expectations. This novel narrates the journey of an orphan boy named Pip who has good luck and great expectations and then loses both his luck and expectations. Through this rise and fall, Pip learns how to find happiness. He learns the meaning of friendship and the meaning of love and of course becomes a better person for it. Now let me read out the text loudly for you. My father's family name is Pirip and my first name Philip. But as a child, I couldn't say either. So I called myself Peep, and then so did everyone else. Children, here Peep is the narrator of the story. Here Peep narrates the story of one of his childhood days. Peep's father's family name is Pirip, that is, his surname is Pirip, and his first name is Philip. But his infant tongue could not pronounce either his first name or last. Doing his best, he called himself Peep to make it short. And so others also called him by this name. I say that my name is Pirip because that's what is written on my father's tombstone, and it is what my sister told me. My sister is married to the blacksmith. Pip says that his name is Pirip as that is written on his father's tombstone, and even his sister, Mrs. Joe Gregory, told him so. Pip's sister is married to the blacksmith, Mr. Joe Gregory. Now, let me tell you who is a blacksmith. A blacksmith is a person who creates tools and objects out of metal. We lived in a marshy area down by the river a few miles from the sea. One day I stood in the churchyard and looked over my parents' tombstone at the dark, flat wilderness beyond the churchyard. Peep's sister, and his brother-in-law lived in a wetland beside the river which was few miles away from the sea. One day Peep stood in the churchyard. Now let me tell you children, churchyard is an enclosed area surrounding a church. In the churchyard, Peep looked over his parents' tombstone, which was at the dark, flat, uninhabited and unproductive land beyond the churchyard. It was dark as it was an evening time. The marshes were crisscrossed with ditches and mounds. In the distance, I could see the grey line of the river and then far away the sea. It was a cold day. The wetlands were separated by channels and small piles of rocks and stones. In the distance, Peep could see the grey horizon touching the riverbank and distant sea. It was grey because the diffuse light of the setting sun mixes with the dark sky. It was a cold day. Children, actually in the novel, it was a Christmas day. See children, lonely and sad Peep sitting beside his parents' tombstone. The grey land and the grey sky made me feel sad. I suddenly realized that I was an orphan and I began to cry. The grey land and the grey sky made me feel very sad. Actually, grey color doesn't have any brightness in itself. It is a shabby color. Grey represents gloominess, loneliness and sadness. The gloomy atmosphere made Peep very sad. All of a sudden, Peep realized that he had no mother and father. he was an orphan, which is very pathetic for a child, and so he began to cry. "Hold your noise!" cried a terrible voice. It came from a man who had just stepped out from behind a gravestone. "Keep still, or I will cut your throat." While Pip was crying, suddenly Pip heard a horrible voice threatening him to stop making noise. The voice came from a man who just came out from behind a tombstone. The man threatened Pip to keep quiet or he would cut his throat. This man was frightening. Pip was very afraid of this man. Now let us come to the description of the man that made him frightening. He was dressed in rough grey clothes and he had a big iron chain on his leg. The man was dressed in grey-colored rough clothes and had a big iron chain tied on his legs. He was an escaped convict. He was a convict who had escaped from prison. His shoes were broken and he had an old rag tied round his head. He wore shoes the sole of which was torn, and he had a piece of old tattered cloth tied round his head. He was dirty from being soaked in the muddy water from the ditches. His clothes were dirty, for it was all wet in the muddy water from the ditches. He was covered in scratches from nettles and stones. His body was covered with marks or wounds from nettles and stones. Now children, nettle is a weed that irritates the skin when touched. He limped and shivered and glared and growled. He walked with difficulty as he had a big iron chain on his legs, and he was shaking terribly because of cold. He looked angry and was making a low and harsh rumbling sound in the throat. His teeth chattered in his head as he seized me by the chin. His teeth was making a rapid clicking noise by striking together because of cold as he took hold of Pip's chin very forcibly. Today up to this, children, please download the PDF of the text from the school website and read the portion that we have read today. In the next class, we will continue this story. Till then, goodbye.